And we are back. We are up to episode 182 of the Horror Guys.
I'm Kevin.
I'm Brian.
And we're back. We're going to talk about horror movies.
We got how many? 16? 17?
We got 4 horror movies. And
okay then.
4 of them and a short.
But they're all good, right?
Yes. Well, no.
What do we got?
Well, we got What Josiah Saw from 2022/2021. It's one of those weird ones with the COVID and the dates and everything. Is it officially 2021 or 22? But it's new.
Yes.
It's new. It's very new. It's just out. Yeah. I Walked with a Zombie from 1943. And we got Tales from the Crypt, Bordello of Blood, 1996. And then we have sort of Tales from the Crypt, Ritual from 2002, which is actually a remake of I Walked with a Zombie.
What a coincidence.
We
saw both this week.
That we have both of these in the show. Yeah.
Wow. Strange how that works sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. And of course, as always, the show is brought to you by the Horror Guys Guide books. Go to horrorguys.com/books and buy them all.
Buy all the books.
Buy all the books.
Wherever fine books are sold.
And of course, Horror Bulletin magazine. You can find a link there also for those. And we're up to 11 issues of that. Almost a year. Be a year next month.
All right.
Actually, be about a year and about 3 weeks.
So there'll be 12 of them, eh?
Scary 12 issues. But that's not as bad as issue 13, which is going to probably be something special, maybe. It's a long ways off yet.
And this is appropriate, too. Do you think the folks at home will hear the rumbling and grumblings? Because it is a dark and stormy night.
It is. It's a dark and stormy night outside.
Yeah.
Yes, in the old
perfect atmosphere.
Castle. The Horror Guys Castle. Which is really just a matte painting, but you can't tell because it's an audio podcast.
Special effects.
All right, what do we got first?
What Josiah Saw.
What did Josiah see?
Well, we're not going to tell you because it's so brand new. We're not going to super spoil it.
Right, yeah. This one, it's got got some surprises in it, so you watch it for. We did both like it.
In the spoiler-free judgment zone, it is said that it's a thriller, and it's pushing it to be called horror. I thought so, and we both thought so.
It has the elements.
Yeah, it looks great, has a powerhouse cast, an intricate story, and really interesting visuals. It seemed maybe a little bit long and drawn out, but things build so nicely as the past comes to light. Multiple things aren't what they seem, and it really has an interesting conclusion.
Yes. And of course, this is directed by Vincent Granshaw, written by Robert Allen Dilt, stars Robert Patrick, Nick Stahl, and Scott Hayes.
And all 3 of them looking like a mile of bad road.
2 hours long, and if you've never heard of it, it's available on Shudder? Shudder, yes.
Yes, it is Shudder currently.
And we have a trailer in the show notes as always.
Highly recommend this one. We both really liked it.
I
highly recommend it. You kind of recommend it,
This is probably the best thing we saw this week.
You do?
Yeah.
You liked? Okay.
This is not our high-end week. This is not none of these are going to be outstanding this time, I don't think.
Oh, I thought this was outstanding. The more and it's one that stuck with me.
Oh, Josiah was the best of the bunch this week, yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. I thought it was outstanding. One of my favorites.
Okay, I liked it.
Up there, yeah.
It definitely, I don't want to say it surprised, well, okay, it surprised me. Let's put it that way. All right, so semi-spoilery. We open on establishing shots that demonstrate that we're in farm country. There's lots of poverty-stricken farm country. The dirty, Dust Bowl kind of farm kind of things.
Yep.
Thomas talks to his broken tractor, which he almost gets started. Josiah Graham watches him from inside the house.
That's Dad.
Yeah. Thomas comes inside and mentions something about God, and Josiah tells him that he saw something strange this morning. And what he saw was really not that big of a deal. He described seeing a little leprechaun out in the field doing a jig.
Well, he's just messing with Thomas.
Yes, it's a silly story.
He thinks that this leprechauns are as real as God. That's how Josiah's opinion is, and he's mocking.
You believe in God? I saw leprechauns
Thomas for being devout. Yeah.
Okay, and then we move on to part 1. We cut to some real estate developers talking to local assemblyman Mr. Gentry. They want the town's outlying properties so they can extract oil from shale. Gentry points out that the Graham property will be a hard sell. That place has a bad history. He tells that the wife, Miriam Graham, hanged herself one morning. The townsfolk, they swear it's haunted, that a ghost walks that farm at night. The developers are not impressed.
No, they want it.
The town thinks of Thomas as the village idiot. Thomas is infatuated with Tanner, a little boy in town. And immediately you're wondering, is he a pedo?
That's the immediate thing that comes to mind, yeah.
Thomas admits to Josiah that he still looks for his mother's ghost outside every night. Josiah hits him and insists, she ain't out there. That night, Josiah wakes up in the middle of the night and sees something that terrifies him. It's not leprechauns.
No, more than that.
We've been given a way to wash away our sins and make peace with God, he tells Thomas in the morning. He believes in God now, and he believes that Miriam is in hell for committing suicide.
But there's a way to save her.
Dead Miriam came to him last night and explained it all. They have to right a great wrong, and she can be saved. But first, they have to clean up the house, which is a neglected mess. Josiah and Thomas get to work on getting the place shipshape. The two of them talk about women, sex, and dirty magazines. The conversation gets weird, to say the least.
Kinda does.
Then we pop over to part 2, which has nothing to do with part 1.
Or so it seems at first.
Well, they all tie together eventually.
Yes.
Elsewhere, Thomas's brother Eli has sex with a woman for drugs. His parole officer comes by and handcuffs him before asking about a missing 9-year-old girl. Eli says that the girl was 16 in a bar and didn't look her age. He did his time, and he has nothing to do with this new missing girl. Later, Eli goes to see local crime lord Boone after getting past his gatekeepers. Boone hands the sheriff a big envelope of money. Eli owes Boone a substantial amount, and Boone threatens to have him killed. Boone tells a story about a local group of gypsies that are supposed to have a bunch of gold bars. He wants Eli to go with Billy and see if the story is true and steal them. Well, Billy explains the plan. Eli's job is just to go in and distract the girls. He's the good-looking one. Eli goes to the gypsy party, and they all do gypsy dances and gypsy stuff. Wait a minute. Actual Romani-type gypsies in Odessa, Texas? I am skeptical.
Yeah, because they were so Romani.
These are right out of a werewolf movie.
So ethnic.
Yeah, this is very European.
Yeah, this is like people from 100 years ago in Europe. Still speaking the language, all the customs, and yeah, that seemed odd.
Eli talks to Gina, and she is, in fact, distracted. He's doing his job. She offers to give him a reading. You think that means what it sounds like it means?
Well, it turns out it does.
She takes him to an old woman who is a genuine fortune teller. She says he's going to die. Soon. She then reads the tea leaves and says, "You are why she burns." Who burns? Your mother. You run from something unspeakable that's not finished with you yet. Oh, and you're after our gold!
Yeah.
The gypsies then attack the 3 men, and Eli's tea was drugged.
And it took some time to figure that out, but no, she wasn't really a fortune teller. She knew all that stuff ahead of time. Boone tipped them off about everything about Eli.
She did? Or he did?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Well, the gold, yeah.
I didn't pick that up.
Oh, yeah. Boone had tipped them off. The whole thing was a setup. Yeah, she wasn't fortune telling at all. All of that was stuff that I think Boone had spilled to them. Yeah.
I did not pick that up, so okay, good catch.
At first I did not, but yeah, after thinking about it, yeah, she's just a total faker.
Well, when Eli wakes up, he finds that Boone has sold him out. He's still with the gypsies. Eli gives his captor the drugs he got from sex earlier, not mentioning to him that it's uncut and way too powerful. The captor is soon quite dead of an accidental overdose. Eli takes the gold, which is in a locked box, and leaves with the missing 9-year-old.
That box was way too light.
Yeah.
That's a criticism I have.
Gold is heavy.
Yeah.
Anyway, he leaves with the missing 9-year-old who actually had been kidnapped by the gypsies. Sort of a bonus rescue. Mm-hmm. He gets away and squares things up with Boone, And then I'm going to stop talking because it gets kind of spoilery after that.
It does. And then there's more spoilers.
Yeah.
It's really, really well done.
That was part 2. There is a part 3 and then a concluding part. So there's a good bit more there. All right, well, this movie is just plain weird. The cinematography and sets are excellent. It all looks really creepy and dark. Not the kind of dark that you can't see on TV. You can see everything. It's just grim.
Yeah. Great.
The acting is good, and all the characters are believable. The stereotypical fortune-telling gypsies might be a little much. Early on, we hear Josiah and Thomas talk about Eli, and we see in an old photo that Mary is their sister. So all of this is one big, connected family drama.
Yeah, in a later chapter, we see Mary and what's going on in her life.
Yeah. About halfway through the film, Kevin said, "This is long and dull."
But I reconsider that
About
statement.
2/3 of the way through, I was agreeing with him. I still agree with him, but it does all tie up in an interesting way at the end, and I think a lot of the middle action with Eli could have been cut out.
Possibly.
Actually, they really didn't need his story at all. He could have just showed up at the house toward the end. But it's majorly creepy. There's no arguing that. But is it horror? Well, there's a ghost. Maybe more than one.
Mm-hmm.
There's maybe magical gypsies.
Maybe.
There's cursed gold.
Maybe.
There's all kinds of... Yeah,
all kinds of,
I'm
all
gonna
kinds
say,
of maybes. I feel like it was everything is maybe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of maybes.
Maybe it's horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is.
Anyway, highly recommended.
Yeah. Not exactly what you call a scary kind of horror movie, more of an unsettling horror.
Uh-huh.
All right, what is really unsettling to me is our next film, the god-awful Tales from the Crypt, Bordello of Blood from 1996.
This wasn't the god-awful one. Ritual was the god-awful one.
Well, okay, they both suck badly.
Oh, I kind of enjoyed this one. It's the stupid, fun Tales from the Crypt thing.
The first one, Demon Knight, was funny.
Was very fun.
And very good.
This has not as much humor, not as good, but still good.
Okay, well, I have one
Still
major
decent.
problem with this movie that we'll get to later.
Yeah, okay.
Directed by Gilbert Adler, written by Robert Zemeckis, Bob Gale, and William Gaines, stars Dennis Miller, problem number 1, Erica Eleniak, Angie Everhart, and Chris Sarandon, hour and 27 minutes. Spoiler-free if you haven't seen this one. It has some great gore, a whole lot of humor, and Dennis Miller being Dennis Miller. It's okay, but it's not great. Like one of the okay episodes of Tales from the Crypt that goes on a little too long.
Okay.
It's all right.
Maybe a 6 out of 10.
Okay, I'll give it a solid 5. It's certainly not the worst thing we've seen this week.
No, it's not.
All right, what happens?
In Tierra del Fuego, a group of men ride by some skeletal corpses put up on poles. It looks like an Indiana Jones, but the main guy is a dwarf, Vincent Prather. Well, they dig their way into a cavern, and there's a coffin that supposedly contains treasure. No, it's just a skeleton with a little dried skin. This is Lilith, the most horrible woman the world has ever known. And he has 4 pieces of her heart, which magically connect and fuse together and start beating on their own. And then he puts the heart in her chest, body reconstitutes around it. She's the mother of all vampires, and she's very hungry. Vincent has the key that we saw in the previous film, and she's very afraid of it. So
I don't remember now. What happened to that key at the end of that movie?
It went off with the new
Oh,
Guardian.
that's right. There was a new Guardian.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And I don't think it was necessarily the same key.
I think it was. It's
think
their
it was
little,
the very
their little
same?
tie-in.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, it's the same series and the same prop, so yeah, I think it's probably the same.
Okay. Well, then there's the Crypt Keeper doing his business, and he's got a mummy with him. They're playing a game. Mummy cuts off the Crypt Keeper's hands, which leads into the main story.
And that's it. The whole Crypt Keeper thing takes about 30 seconds.
So therefore, you know it's a Tales from the Crypt.
And here's a minor spoiler.
Yeah.
The Crypt Keeper doesn't come back at the end. That was it. That was the entire Tales from the Crypt, was the 30-second Crypt Keeper segment.
No, this is the mummy one. He comes back at the end.
Oh,
William Sadler is
We've
the
watched
mummy.
too many Crypt movies
Yeah.
this week. Yes, he does.
You're
Yes,
running
he
it
does.
together with Ritual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ignore that last part. He does return.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Catherine Verdot does a workout as credits roll. Her brother Caleb wants to go out and have some fun. He's a partier. She's kind of a religious nut. As Caleb goes to the bar, one of the patrons says, hey, he knows a place where his whole gang can get laid so hard they won't be able to walk home afterwards.
That's pretty hard.
Yeah, he oversells it. Credits roll. Well, McCutcheon lets them in, and it's a funeral home. But he promises lots of naked flesh, so they follow him, a little uncertainly. Well, the old man points a gun at them, makes them climb into a coffin together. This is two guys.
It's kind of a hard sell there.
Caleb and his buddy.
You're going to have fun,
Yeah,
or I'd shoot
or else. Well, the coffin then goes into the crematorium, down a ramp, and into the bordello. That's how you get into the secret bordello in the back.
It's like a little roller coaster with coffins.
Yeah, Well, we soon see that most of the girls have tooth marks on their necks. This is not a good sign.
That's never good.
Yeah. Caleb's friend goes first, and then Lilith comes in. She's the boss. She gives him tongue all the way down until his heart bursts out.
That's quite a tongue.
And she eats it. So, yeah, there's a little gore here. Lilith then comes in to see Caleb and offers him some deep throat. Well, later, Catherine goes to the police station, but they don't have time for her. Rafe Gutmann introduces himself. He's a private investigator. Rafi takes the case, and she fills him in on the details. Rafi finds Caleb's friends, finds out the address of the whorehouse, and Rafi goes to the address, but finds a funeral in progress.
Hard to get to the horror house when there's that actual funeral going on.
We cut to Reverend Current. Current? Yes, in his huge megachurch. He's
like in Currency.
Yes, Chris Sarandon. I thought he was a hoot in that role. And he's like every TV preacher you've ever seen. Rafi walks in during the sermon and finds Catherine there. So is Vincent. Rafi thinks she's pretty uptight. Rafi goes into the bar, runs into the same weirdo that told Caleb about the brothel. Well, Rafi goes back to the funeral home again, talks to McCutcheon, and he doesn't get in. But he breaks in anyway and sees Lilith. He sees evidence that Caleb had been there. And the next night, he finally gets in as a customer. He takes the coffin ride downstairs. He runs into Tammy, who shows him around. Well, he ties up Tammy and escapes, but he leaves his wallet behind, which Lilith finds. Lilith shows up in Rafi's office. She tries to seduce him, but Catherine interrupts. The two of them go to the police and tell them about the brothel. And they go there, but Rafi's story doesn't check out. It's just a funeral home now. The little entrance thing is just a crematorium again.
It's a real crematorium now.
Yeah. Well, Lilith talks to Vincent about doing away with the Reverend and going off on their own. The Reverend rehearses for his big show with a devil model and the laser light of the Lord.
Little hokey.
A little hokey, yeah. Catherine tells the Reverend that she wants to do a documentary. The Reverend goes to a strip club in disguise to meet Vincent and Lilith. Catherine comes in with a cameraman for her film, and both men go out the back door. Vincent destroys the key. Uh-oh. No way to rein in Lilith now.
Nope.
Both Catherine and Rafi have issues with people not showing up on the film. Like, I know there was a girl sitting there, because Lilith isn't, she doesn't, not just a mere thing. It's a film thing, too.
Films, too.
Yeah. Rafi suggests vampires. That's ridiculous. But Caleb calls, and he needs help. They do find him, but he's obviously a vampire now. Catherine is captured by the vampires, and Rafi ends up in the hospital with the police. And then the Reverend comes to the brothel to see Lilith. He says he wants to join them. Rafi drives right through the front door, and Rafi and the Rev go vampire hunting. They shoot the vamps with squirt guns full of holy water. More gore, more destruction. The Reverend tries to kill Lilith, but this goes badly for the Reverend. Rafi doesn't fare any better, but at least he lives to try again. And the Reverend dies, but tells Catherine to go back to their studio and make a broadcast. And they do, and the special effects all go crazy as Lilith attacks Catherine. Rafi is in the control booth. but he has access to the laser light of the Lord.
You knew this was coming back at some point.
Oh, yeah, that's Chekhov's laser. He cranks it up to burn a cross right through Lilith and splits her heart into 4 parts again. But that doesn't stop her because the 4 parts are still inside her until Catherine pulls the pieces out and Lilith bursts into flames. Happy ending.
Yeah.
Maybe. And the Crypt Keeper makes a final joke. There's nothing left but the mummy's head.
They were playing like strip poker, only they were cutting off body parts.
For body parts, and there's nothing left but the mummy's head. Which was William Sadler.
It was, from the previous film.
Yeah.
TV shopping networks were mentioned more than once. These were a big thing back in the 90s, and of course so were TV preachers. I guess they still have both of those.
Yeah.
Just don't see those much anymore now that nobody does cable.
Yeah.
The whole world has turned to podcasts instead of TV.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's my little world.
Podcast.
Dennis Miller played the same character he played all through the 90s before he went insane and ruined his career over politics. At one point he says, "I feel like I'm in a bad Tales from the Crypt episode." He isn't wrong.
It wasn't that bad.
The gore when the vampires die is pretty impressive, but otherwise there's too much humor and not enough of anything else here. The first one was funny, and it had good scares. This one is just a comedy, basically, with vampires. The previous film was a lot better. This simply had too much Dennis Miller being Dennis Miller.
Yeah. It's biggest fault.
I liked him in the 90s, and he did not age well.
He used to be funny.
He used to be, yeah.
He used to do funny things, and then he stopped and just being an angry guy.
So, we watched a short film this week. The Puppeteer, 2022, directed by Jacob Arbiter. We've seen things from him before. Mm-hmm. Stars Vicky Hansen, Patrick Hansen, and Donald Clough. 7 minutes, 30 seconds. Link in the show notes to watch it. Tell us about it.
A woman lies in bed and watches an old video. She's watching a recording of her and her husband on vacation. She watches a creepy man thing appear behind her husband in the video, and then she sees it outside her window, alongside her dead husband.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Well, the makeup in this one here is really well done. The puppeteer himself seems a little rigid, like just a rubbery kind of thing.
It's a man wearing a mask. Clearly it is.
But still, the idea is good. The execution is excellent. And, something bad is in the works, and it doesn't disappoint. I found this one truly unsettling. This is probably the most unsettling short that I've seen in quite a while. I thought it was creepy and just, gave me the heebie-jeebies.
It was obvious what was happening, but it was not obvious where it was going to go.
Yes.
Yeah, you didn't know.
Yeah. So I highly recommend this one.
Yeah, it's a good one. All right, so then for our oldie, well, of course, as already has been mentioned, we watched the other Tales from the Crypt movie, Ritual, which is a remake of 1943's movie, I Walked with a Zombie. So we thought we'd watch the original first. We got I Walked with a Zombie from 1943, directed by Jacques Tourneur, written by Kurt Siodmak, Ardell Ray, and Inez Wallace, stars Francis D., Tom Conway, and James Ellison, hour and 9 minutes. And spoiler-free, it's low-key horror, but it's pretty entertaining. There are zombies, but it's more of a mystery, figuring out what's going on and who is behind it. What'd you think? Did you like it?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's old. It's kind of tame, but it was good.
But I thought it held up pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty darn entertaining.
All right. Well, I Walked with a Zombie, explains Betsy. It all began in such an ordinary way. Flashback music.
So flashback, that she makes it out alive at the end.
Pretty much the whole movie is a flashback. I don't remember them coming back to her at the end, did they? Other than maybe some narration?
I think maybe a quick thing at the end, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Betsy Connell interviews for a medical job in the Caribbean. She'll be paid $200 per month, which is good money, $200 a month.
Huge back in 1943.
The hospital director makes it all sound really nice, especially talking about the palm trees when there's heavy falling snow visible right outside the windows of his office. Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of an amusing scene because she's kind of bulking at the job and so far away. And he's like, oh, warm sand, tropical palm trees.
And you look out the window.
She's looking out the window thinking, and bundled up in her heavy coat.
Well, she soon meets Paul Holland, who is her new boss in the West Indies. "There's no beauty here, only death and decay," he warns. "Everything good dies here, even the stars." He's obviously a lot of fun, so Betsy decides she likes him. Weird taste in this girl.
Yes.
The driver explains that the Hollands brought all the black folks to the island as slaves back in the day. She's very cheerful about the story, ignoring all the details of slavery. "Oh, look, it's happy little black people playing in the fields. Ah, ha, ha, it's wonderful."
It was a different time.
It must have been. She settles in and gets called to dinner with Paul's half-brother Wesley Rand. They hear the drums in the jungle. She likes him too, but there's obviously some conflict between the two brothers. Betsy wakes up that night hearing a woman crying outside. She follows the sound to a tower. She runs into Jessica Holland, who looks like a zombie, and advances on her threateningly. Paul comes in and breaks things up. Betsy said she heard crying, which Paul denies, but Alma the maid speaks up and says there was a baby born. That's probably what she heard. They're all still wallowing in the misery of their former slavery, so they cry a lot when a baby is born, and laugh with joy at a funeral. You cry because the baby's coming into this terrible world, and you laugh when they go out. Alma attends to both Betsy and Jessica in the morning. "She was very sick, and then she went mindless," Alma says about Jessica. Dr. Maxwell comes by, and Betsy asks him about zombies. He says that Jessica had a spinal fever, which results in a person without any willpower, but they can obey simple commands like a sleepwalker. He tells the nurse, Betsy, about her treatment and care. On her day off, Betsy runs into Wesley in town. They listen to a street singer singing a song about the Holland family, which offends Wesley. It's not exactly complimentary.
No, not at all.
Wesley warns Betsy about Paul. Betsy meets Wesley's mother, Mrs. Rand. That night, over dinner, everyone discusses voodoo, as one does. I mean, I constantly talk about voodoo over dinner.
You're in the West Indies, it naturally would come up.
Okay. Hey, did you hear that music last night? The boom, boom, boom.
Oh, yeah, that's just the voodoo drums.
Yeah. Well, Betsy falls in love with Paul, but Paul is obviously still married to Jessica, who's not dead, mostly. Betsy wants to cure Jessica even more just to help him. Dr. Maxwell wants to try a risky procedure on Jessica involving insulin and an electric shock. Alma tries to point out that there are better doctors on the island. The Hungan, the voodoo priest. Betsy asks Mrs. Rand about taking Jessica to the Hungan. The two girls do go to the voodoo ritual, and she runs into Mrs. Rand there, who warns Betsy that Jessica cannot be cured. A man sticks Jessica with a sword, but she doesn't bleed, like a dead person.
Something ain't right there.
When they get home, Paul admits that he doesn't really want Jessica back. Maybe she was cold before she was a dead person. Wesley thinks that Paul drove Jessica deliberately insane, but Jessica doesn't believe that. He wants Betsy to go back to the mainland for her own safety. That night, a giant zombie shuffles around outside Betsy's room. Betsy follows the sound and goes back into the tower. She calls for Paul, and they both see the zombie man. Mrs. Rand intervenes and sends the zombie back where he came from. You do not mess with Mrs. Rand.
No, you do not.
Dr. Maxwell comes in and says there's going to be an investigation into what happened to Jessica. Wesley put them up to this. He still accuses Paul of everything. Mrs. Rand claims that Jessica isn't insane. She's dead. Living dead. She turned Jessica into a zombie, and she admits it all. Jessica wanted to leave Paul and run away with Wesley, so she asked the Hungan to make Jessica into a zombie. Dr. Maxwell says it's just a coincidence, and Jessica simply has jungle fever. No one believes Mrs. Rand except Wesley. We then see the Hungan doing a ritual with a doll, and Jessica starts walking toward them. Paul and Wesley argue about the truth of voodoo. Wesley thinks Betsy knows the drugs well enough to cure Jessica. Later, the Hungan tries again, and this time Wesley opens the gate and lets her out. Wesley follows Jessica and then stabs her to death. Okay, then.
Mm-hmm.
He carries her into the ocean, and they both die as the giant zombie simply watches from the beach. Some local fishermen find the bodies and carry them home as Paul and Betsy watch in horror. The end.
Not a happy ending.
It's got a few things that wouldn't fly in modern films.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Yeah, but considering that this takes place in Jamaica in the 1940s, it's probably not too offensive.
Well, especially back then.
White people sure dressed formally in the 40s Caribbean islands, though.
Oh, yeah. The
It's
guys
hot
are always
there.
in suits.
Suits and ties, and she's in a dress, and
Yeah.
you know it's got to be 90 degrees and humid there.
And they're not sweating.
This is pre-air conditioning, too. The men are all in suits and ties, the women all have long gowns, and no one sweats. I suspect that's not the reality of the situation. The love triangle, or quadangle in this case, isn't really necessary, but it doesn't take up too much time. It's not exactly what you call terrifying, but it does have zombies, and watching the mystery unfold is entertaining.
Yeah, I thought it was entertaining.
I liked it.
And then somebody said, hey, this cool old movie from 1943, let's remake that.
Well, it had a good story, but it didn't,
Yeah.
like we said, it had some things that would not hold up today.
Yeah, in case you liked that but wished it was awful, there's Ritual in 2002.
Directed by Avi Nesher, written by Inez Wallace, Kurt Siodmak, and Earl Ray. Stars Jennifer Grey from Dirty Dancing, Craig Sheffer from Nightbreed, and Daniel Lapine, who I have no idea what he had ever done.
But stuff.
Okay.
So, it's got actors who
It's got actors,
know
yeah.
what they're doing, but boy, when bad movies happen to good actors.
And Tim Curry's like 19th down the list. He's in this too.
Yeah, and he's always delightful, except not in this
one,
because
yeah.
he didn't have anything to do, really. He wasted in
He
this.
did have things to do, but
it's-
it wasn't anything interesting.
Yeah, I think it's mentioned in this somewhere.
Yeah.
That, he was wasted in this role.
Hour 39 minutes, trailer in the show notes. Spoiler free, this is a horror movie that was made, then after the fact was called a Tales from the Crypt Presents, with an introduction by the Crypt Keeper tacked on. So yeah, this was just a normal Hollywood horror movie. It was not a Tales from the Crypt film. It was, just somebody decided to make this.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had promised 3 Tales from the Crypt movies. And the budget wasn't there, and the Bordello of Blood didn't do all that well at the box office. So they said, hey, let's just pay somebody a little money and stick our Tales from the Crypt on this other movie.
We'll make a 30-second intro with the Crypt Keeper and call it good.
Yep. And it's totally lacking the humor that makes the Tales from the Crypt episodes and movies so much dark fun. I said before that the Bordello of Blood had too much humor. This has none.
No.
This is a long, dull slog, despite having a very talented cast. All right, so what happens?
Well, the Crypt Keeper has moved to Jamaica, and he has gotten deadlocks.
Deadlocks.
Yeah. He likes the scenery there.
And that takes about 15 seconds.
Yeah, maybe 30.
Okay.
It was pretty short.
It was pretty short.
Yeah.
And he's very puppety looking, too.
Yeah.
He's
not
a really
the
crappy
usual
Crypt
animatronic.
Keeper.
Yeah, they really didn't even put the effort into that. Sad. Yeah. Well, credits roll, and we see a huge garden party. We meet Dr. Matthew Hope as he meets some of the other guests. The party has been set up by Paul Claiborne as his brother Wesley's birthday party. And we see that Wesley is in his room under some kind of voodoo spell.
So we've got Paul and Wesley, same as the other characters.
Yep. Well, that night, Dr. Peter Winsvold meets up with a woman who wants a DNA check on something. As soon as she leaves, the lab starts to boil, and so does he.
It's very hot.
His shoes melt. The woman who wanted the DNA check is also killed out in the woods. Well, elsewhere in the States, Alice Dodgson, same doctor as Betsy.
Betsy is not a modern name.
But she was a nurse, and now she's a doctor. Anyway, elsewhere, yes, Alice Dodgson has a dying child patient, and she wants to use an unapproved treatment. The head of the hospital denies her request, but she does it anyway. Well, the patient dies despite their best efforts, and her license is suspended for 2 years because of the unauthorized thing. And she ends up taking a medical position overseas in Jamaica, where the job doesn't require a license.
Ooh, that's not sketchy.
Yeah. Well, JB picks her up at the airport. She soon notices that a lot of people carry a machete. He watches men work. She watches men working in the sugarcane fields. JB's father is a voodoo priest. Alice goes to meet Paul Claiborne, who explains the job. Alice has been hired to care for Wesley. Wesley thinks he's a zombie. She sets up shop in the same lab that Dr. Winsvold melted in. Well, that night, Alice is kidnapped, tied down, and has spiders poured all over her body. Oh, she wakes up just in a dream. Then she goes to see Caro, who answers the door naked. She's a local gal. And Caro is a sculptor. And she seems like a lot of fun. I bet she'd be fun to hang out with. The two of them go to see Wesley, who lives in an old crypt. He's a jerk, but he really believes that he's a zombie. JB explains that zombieism is just a sickness of the soul. Somewhere, someone is doing a voodoo ritual. JB has a seizure while driving.
And just to point out, Wesley answers the door, he talks, he eats, he breathes.
He doesn't much seem like a zombie.
He doesn't really seem like it, no, but he swears he is.
But it does seem like it's in his head. Yeah. Well, Alice talks to JB's father about Wesley. He, too, has a seizure. That night at dinner, Alice talks to Dr. Hope, who knows all about Wesley. Wesley actually shows up to dinner, and he wants to sit next to Alice. Later, Paul and Wesley play some music for the crowd. Wesley lays on the charm, and Alice is into it. On the way home, some of the other party guests are killed. And Wesley is, again, not seeming very zombie-like.
No.
He does have some medical issues, apparently some blood issues and, some disease going on, but,
He's not healthy, but he doesn't seem like a zombie.
He doesn't seem very zombie-like. Yeah. Well, JB warns Alice to just leave the place now. It's only going to get worse. And it does. There's some talk about Paul selling the plantation. Alice literally trips over the body of one of the dead guests. She takes a blood sample from Wesley, and soon they're having sex on the beach. That escalated quickly. And Alice dreams about some bad things again. Well, the lab report on Wesley's blood does show something strange. Alice also gets tested for the same virus. Dr. Hope calls Paul, and it's clear they are in cahoots on some kind of real estate plot.
It's always a real estate plot.
It's all about the money. Yep. We see that Dr. Hope is a veterinarian, and he's been experimenting on cats, at least until the superintendent stabs him. That's like the chief of police.
Yeah, and he's something.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's a character.
He's about 7 feet tall and about 5 feet wide, and he doesn't really say much.
No, but he gets the job done.
He's a biggin.
Yeah. Well, Alice tells Wesley about Paul selling the estate, and he takes it badly. They're brothers, and they're supposed to be sharing the estate. Well, Paul tells that Wesley is no longer fit to make decisions, and Paul now has power of attorney. Uh-oh. Well, Maid Violet explains the terms of Wesley's will. Alice enlists JB's father and Violet to help her out. Alice ends up getting a vision that tells her something about Wesley, Hope, and the lab full of cats. Alice now thinks she can create an antidote for Wesley's virus, why he's feeling sick. Alice explains to Wesley that Dr. Hope created the zombie plague in order to infect Wesley and make him look like the village idiot. Wesley's will gives everything to the locals, so he can't simply be killed by Paul. Got to take his
driven insane
power of attorney
away. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Alice tells Paul that she's found a cure for Wesley's illness, and she knows it's him behind it all. The superintendent kidnaps Wesley. Alice comes across a huge voodoo party where they seem to be turning Wesley into a full-blown zombie now. Paul is there, and he doses Wesley himself. And then they put Wesley in a coffin and bury him. Alice gets the drop on Paul, but then the voodoo leader reveals herself to be Caro. That was kind of a surprise. I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Turns out she's Paul and Wesley's illegitimate sister. Oh.
Which we've not heard a thing about before this, so there was no foreshadowing, no suspicions. No.
But with Wesley and Paul out of the way, she would get it all. And that's her end game. Well, she orders Alice to blow the zombie dust into JB's face, but she blows it on Caro instead.
Stupid.
Shouldn't have trusted her with that powder. Yeah. And they dig up Wesley and give him the antidote. Later, Alice and Wesley get married. Elsewhere, the superintendent brings home his own wife, Zombie Caro.
Justice.
Yeah.
Well, the Crypt Keeper never looked so puppety before, which was part of their making it a Tales from the Crypt after the fact. They didn't use the usual high-tech animatronic Crypt Keeper. And his bits were entirely unnecessary and actually kind of cringeworthy from a modern perspective. This was, of course, based on the 1943 film I Walked with a Zombie. They didn't even bother with a closing Crypt Keeper scene.
Yeah.
So
it was kind of pathetic all around.
Yeah, they added that 20-second, 30-second Crypt Keeper in the beginning and stuck Tales from the Crypt on the label, and boom.
Yeah, boom, there you go.
People went to see it that probably wouldn't have saw it otherwise.
Yeah.
All right, so anyway, it's pretty obvious that this was not a Tales from the Crypt movie because there's very little humor here. Tim Curry, one of my favorite actors, just sort of in this and is kind of completely wasted. He plays the veterinarian doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he doesn't have enough to do and enough interesting things to do. And
he's not particularly evil. He's not particularly sleazy, and that's kind of what he does.
Yeah, the character is bland. And
yeah.
The
other cast members are fine. The problem is, if it weren't my job to have watched these films, I'd have turned this off at the 1 hour mark.
Just about.
This was bad.
Mm-hmm.
Too much stuff happens that doesn't really seem related to the plot, and interesting stuff seems to happen in Alice's dreams. All the good horror stuff seems to be nothing but a dream.
Mm-hmm.
So much of the good stuff isn't even real, and it feels at least a half an hour too long. One important thing that I learned from this is that Jamaica is a very sweaty place.
Yes, unlike I Walked with a Zombie.
Everybody here is dripping wet.
Oh, yeah, a lot of sweat. I'd give this one probably a solid 3.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
It was really bad.
Yeah, not their best work.
All right, my favorite for the week is What Josiah Saw. Then we go with I Walked with a Zombie, and then Bordello of Blood, and then Ritual.
Yep.
Your agreement on that?
We are in full agreement there.
Yeah, we both like the short film Puppeteer.
And I'd even like to see what Josiah Saw again.
Now that you know how it all ties together.
Yeah, now that I know, going back and seeing it again, I think would be interesting.
Yeah, ever since we started the show in 2018, I don't think we've ever watched one of these movies twice. We watch them, get our first opinions. I mean, some of these movies we have seen before in the past, all the Vincent Price stuff and things.
And some are worthy of seeing again.
Some of them we hated, but felt like we missed something. Some of them were good, but had twist endings. Some of them we may have misjudged. We really need to go back one of these weeks and watch certain movies again.
Yeah. And have a quick recap show or,
I mean you get on Facebook on some of those horror groups and people are always saying, Hereditary is the best horror movie of all time.
I hear so many people raving about Hereditary.
I hated Hereditary.
I didn't.
I thought it had one funny moment, and you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Other than that, no.
I didn't actively hate it, but I was like, what's the big deal?
Yeah, and Midsummer, same thing.
Oh, I love Midsummer. Oh, see, no, that's what I really like. Yeah. Hereditary, I'd give like a 5. Midsummer, I'd give an 8, 8.5, somewhere around there.
I think I'd give them both 5s.
Okay.
I didn't hate them, but they certainly weren't as good as, And Suspiria. We talked about it. It was like episode 3 or something. We watched both those Suspiria movies.
I just saw somebody commenting today on how great Suspiria was.
Didn't like it. Either one of them.
No, I didn't care for those.
Actually, I like the original better than the remake, and most people seem to go the other way.
Yeah.
So we are the contrarians of horror in some cases.
On some things, yeah.
Yeah, one of these days. But not next week, where we've got 4 more regular good horror films, maybe good horror films, and a short. Be sure to go over to horrorguys.com and read the reviews there. Or better yet, go to horrorbulletin.com, sign up for our weekly newsletter. You get all those reviews in your mailbox once a week on Saturday. And also on Saturday, you get 2 or 3 bonus reviews that we don't talk about here. And this week's bonus reviews, we've got, what? Abbott
What's
and
that?
Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And also, because the first one wasn't enough, Abbott and Costello meet the Mummy.
Now, those have all the creature elements and the horror elements, but they're just madcap funny. Yeah,
Well, they're universal.
They're not really horror.
They're universal, and it is the Universal Mummy. And Universal didn't really, I don't think they did a Jekyll and Hyde. That came from somebody else. But, you know, the previous one, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. That had Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, all the, Bela Lugosi, and Lon Chaney Jr. Yeah, they're official. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not scary unless you're 5.
They're goofy, goofy fun, goofy funny.
Yeah, they're good. But you can read those over at horrorbulletin.com. You don't have to sign up for the mailing list, but if you do, you get them automatically. And that's our show for this week.
It is.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
We'll see you next week.
See ya.